Hey, everybody, it's that moment you've been waiting for, the DSR Daily, when we look at what's going on around the world, try to give you a little bit of insight based on our conversations with our experts here at the DSR Network. I'm David Rothkopf, and I am joined by Riley Fessler. How are you, Riley?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. There's only one day left in February, which means, if I'm correct in my calculations, that March will be very soon. That's a positive thing, right, Minna?
Great calculating. It's a very positive thing.
Yeah, well, math was one of my strong suits back when I attended school in that cave, in caveman times, and we would just count the drawings of mastodons on the wall in math class. But it's stuck with me ever since. Who's going to kick off the stories?
I will. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts temporarily backed the Trump administration's freeze on foreign aid payments, halting a lower court's order that required $2 billion in payments to contractors by midnight. The administration argued it could not process the payments within the given time frame and sought Supreme Court intervention. The cuts, which could eliminate 90% of USAID's contracts and $60 billion in aid, have disrupted the global aid system and drawn judicial pushback.
Well, again, it's also killed people. Let's not forget about that. There's actually a site you can go to on the web that's counting the number of people who've died because they're not getting their medicine and they're not getting their food. It doesn't count the geopolitical consequences of the United States going back on its promises, the number of people, cities, towns, countries that are alienated, or the door that's being opened to our rivals around the world to step in and to provide for this. But it's a good metric because thousands of people are suffering. It's approaching a couple thousand people have died. And if you don't believe that, just one program, the program that was created by George Bush to fight AIDS in Africa, PEPFAR, and which has been expanded beyond AIDS, one of the great programs in modern American history, has saved 25 million lives. And those lives will not be saved. Those people will suffer. And the United States, which once promised to help, will be blamed for that suffering. Now, Robert's decision only carries us through tomorrow evening, Friday evening, when it is expected the court will make a decision overall on this. It's a consequential decision because, of course, if the court signals that it's going along with this idea that Trump has the ability to unilaterally stop funding that was approved by the Congress, that's kind of it for the Congress as the keeper of the purse strings, the Congress as the appropriator and allocator of funds, and it will change the nature of the structure of the U.S. government forever. So keep an eye out for that. And needless to say, it'll come late on a Friday night because that's when bad news is coordinated to come. Minute.
The FDA canceled a key meeting of its vaccine advisory committee that was set to discuss which flu strains to include in next season's vaccine, sparking concerns about delays in vaccine production. Experts worry that without this meeting, there could be issues with timely vaccine availability for the upcoming flu season, as manufacturing processes rely on early strain decisions. While some vaccine manufacturers like Sanofi have begun production, final strain approvals by the FDA are still necessary for distribution, and the timing of this cancellation raises uncertainty about meeting the required deadlines.
I think it's Sanofi, first of all, but Let us set that aside for a second. This is a terrible decision, and it's a sign that, although RFK Jr. got confirmed in his job by saying, we're going to leave vaccines alone, he, like everybody else who got confirmed for these jobs, felt free to lie. They lied about what they said they were going to do, and they are now going to go about pulling back. Delaying even the consideration of this has a consequence because usually it takes about 6 months to build up the supply of these vaccines, which people start administering typically in August and September. So, lots of people can die of it. It was one of the Republican talking points during COVID that 50,000 people died each year of the flu. So, how bad was all this? Well, yeah, 50,000 people die each year of the flu when we have the vaccine. So only imagine where we're going to be if we don't. And one of the other signs that we've gotten about this in the past couple of days is that we've had the first measles death in the United States in a long time. And when asked about this at that cabinet meeting yesterday, RFK Jr. said, well, these things happen. You know, measles outbreaks are a common occurrence. Well, they're actually not a common occurrence. Once again, he was lying. The last such outbreak was actually 10 years ago. And this outbreak is among, and here, you probably will not be surprised, people who were not vaccinated. So we are playing with fire here, not just overseas with the lives of those who will not get the benefit of medication there, but right here at home, because we put a ignorant, inexperienced lunatic in charge of our healthcare system. Riley, we're not headed in a positive direction here. What do you have?
Nothing good either. The U.S. economy is showing signs of strain as President Trump's aggressive cost-cutting measures, federal layoffs, and sweeping tariffs unsettle businesses and local governments. Trade tariffs, particularly on imports from China, Canada, and Mexico, are raising inflation fears and dampening business investment. Local governments are scrambling to replace lost federal funds, while consumer confidence and business expansion indicators have declined. Economists warn that Trump's policies could slow growth and increase inflation, with job losses potentially reaching 1 million.
They warn of that because that's what's going to happen. And even as Riley was speaking, literally as the words were coming out of his mouth, Donald Trump was posting on Truth Social that what he said yesterday about tariffs going into effect on April 2nd wasn't true, and that they're going to go into effect on March 4th. And even as he released those words, the stock market started to go, uh-oh, that's not good, because introducing the tariffs, 25% on Mexico and Canada, by the way, based completely on lies. He went off yesterday going, oh, the Canadians, we've got fentanyl coming across the border. There was, I think, a total of 40 pounds of fentanyl came across the Canadian border, less than a fraction of 1%. It just literally is not part of the issue. But he is saying, oh, no, we have to go after them for that, because he thinks it's going to, pressure them to come around to his idea that they should be part of this country. It actually is not going to do that. And in fact, it has had an unintended consequence, which is that the right-wing party in Canada, the Conservatives, are getting hammered because they're associated with Trump. And Canadians hate Trump at this point, as well they should. By the way, Americans will come around to that soon enough. Why? Because these tariffs are a tax. And even though Trump yesterday said, well, during my last term, we earned $800 million from China in tariffs, and I know, and Minna knows, and Riley knows that those tariffs were not paid by the Chinese. They were paid by American citizens. This is a tax on Americans. And what's more, the tax bill that the Republicans are considering does not actually contain any tax relief for average Americans. It contains a lot, I think, averaging almost $250 million for the top 1%, but it contains nearly nothing substantial for everybody else. So what does that mean? It means that your taxes with the IRS are going to stay roughly the same, but you're going to have added on top of that this new tax, which is going to be imposed by the government via these tariffs. So people's prices are going to go up, their expendable income is going to go down, the economy is going to slow down, jobs are going to be lost because of this. Foreign countries are going to trade with each other and go to different suppliers rather than U.S. suppliers, so our competitiveness is going to be lost. And this will reveal the reason that we have been against this policy since the disastrous Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the interwar period. This is bad economics, but that's just an abstract way to cast this story. This is bad for average people. It is going to hurt each one of us listening to this podcast, and it is going to help nobody Trump again yesterday was going, well, we don't need those cars coming in here from Canada. Well, who the fuck does he think is building those cars? What is the Canadian car company? Beaver Automobiles Inc.? No. The cars that are coming across the border are Ford and Chevrolet cars. They are cars that are built by American manufacturers who are taking advantage of local economies to build them as efficiently as possible. And most of the trade across these borders is intercompany trade. It also means that some of these tariffs are going to be multiplied several times over. It's just a crazy policy, and we'll see how the markets react to it. The last time the markets started to throw up a little bit in their mouth, Trump backed off. But let's see how this happens. Minute.
I actually just bought a Beaver Automobiles Inc. car.
Did you?
It gets great gas mileage.
Well, yeah, it's because it's powered by wood, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But wood chomped down by those clever little beavers.
Right. A car filled with beavers.
Have you ever seen a beaver dam?
No, but I saw a beaver once, and that was pretty exciting. It was in my car.
In your car, because you get one free beaver with every Beaver Automobile Inc. Beaver dams are kind of amazing. Beavers are really industrious little characters. As the cartoons about wasn't there a cartoon once?
Probably.
About battling beaver. Yeah, no, it was a high quality cartoon. Do you have any stories to talk about, or do you just want to talk about this car you don't own?
I mostly just wanted to talk about the car, but I do also have a story.
Okay, all right.
The White House Correspondents Association announced it would no longer coordinate shared coverage of President Trump, reversing decades of precedent in response to increasing tensions over press access. The decision follows actions by the White House to exclude certain news outlets from events, including barring the Associated Press and removing the Huffington Post from coverage, which the White House Correspondents Association sees as a threat to press freedom. White House Correspondents Association President Eugene Daniels criticized the administration's control over press access, warning that it undermines the independence of the media and the First Amendment.
Yeah, well, okay, fine. That's fine. But, when the White House is picking on Reuters and the Huffington Post and the AP, the rest of the people in the press corps didn't do anything about it. Meanwhile, the press overall is losing spine, as we know from the story of Jeff Bezos limiting what kind of opinion pieces are going to appear in the Washington Post because he doesn't want to offend dear leader in the White House. But in terms of where we're going on this, I think the press needs to sort of stop treating this administration like other administrations and covering every propaganda opportunity that they, roll out, including this horrible press secretary going out, and she just spews lies and is offensive and caters to junk media outlets that happen to regurgitate exactly what the White House wants to hear. Don't go to those things. Don't cover them. Don't give Trump an hour and a half of coverage when he sits there spewing lie after lie after lie. And if you don't believe me, go back. Look at what Daniel Dale, the fact checker for CNN, said right after Trump was done. Every core point Trump made about Ukraine, about tariffs, about their own accomplishments, about their approval ratings, about the degree by which they won the election, and on and on and on. Every single thing he said was a lie. It was not true. And so, airing that and then saving the fact checking for the end. And God, I'm grateful for the fact checking. Most people aren't watching all the way through. So what do they get? They get the notion that this is the truth, or at least, they get the Trump message without any countervailing message. It's time for the press to wake up, realize that they're being manipulated, and cover things in a different way. Do investigative journalism, cover facts, not, be cowed by Trump or by the fake media. And the real fake media, of course, is Fox and OANN and Breitbart and all those other places that are part of the state propaganda apparatus here in this country. There are fractures showing, but what I have not seen is any great act of spine or courage on the part of legacy media or others with regard to this. And right now, most people in the media are dancing to Trump's tune. Riley.
Israel's refusal to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor, a narrow strip along Gaza's border with Egypt, as required by the ceasefire with Hamas, threatens to destabilize the fragile truce. Israeli officials argue their continued presence is necessary to prevent arms smuggling, though reports suggest the tunnels under the corridor have been inactive for years. Hamas considers Israel's control of the area a violation of the ceasefire, while Egypt, a key mediator, opposes any Israeli presence on the border. With negotiations for the ceasefire's second phase stalled, Israel's stance risks escalating tensions and straining relations with Egypt, potentially impacting a broader regional stability.
Look, this is exactly what everybody has expected, which is that Bibi feels he's got cover from Trump. He can do whatever he wants. We mentioned yesterday on the podcast, and if you want to, get into a lot of the issues we're talking about here, go to the Deep State Radio podcast that Rosa Brooks and Ed Luce and I did yesterday, if you haven't already listened to the episode. Yesterday Trump social media re-released, amplified a video about the future of Gaza, which showed, the devastation of Gaza being transformed into a playground for the rich with a Trump casino and a big golden statue of Trump, and weirdly, Elon Musk eating falafel, along or hummus or something, in a revitalized Gaza. These people have an absolutely demented idea of what is possible in the Middle East. But they're going to, they think that they can play their cards so that they can get away with it. Bibi can maintain a permanent war, which allows him to essentially stay in power. He can gradually undercut the power of the Palestinians and eat into their territory, which makes the two-state solution less and less likely. And the Americans will try to distract the other players in the region with other kinds of deals and emoluments and other kinds of things, thus sort of diffuse the tensions, not by solving the problem, but by shifting the conversation. That's likely where we're going to end up on this. Anyway, each and every day it's a new litany of these things, and we will keep following them. One of the other big stories that came out yesterday, besides Elon standing up and kind of dominating the beginning of this cabinet meeting, was that the General Services Administration, seems to indicate that, and Musk's office seems to indicate that we're going to start now on massive layoffs in the government. There's going to include 50% layoffs in agencies like Social Security and the Veterans Administration and so forth. And I think the important thing to keep in mind, also the IRS, one of the things to keep in mind there is that this means slower services, less services. And if the service in question is, are you going to get your paycheck that you live on each month from Social Security, which is your money, right? I mean, you paid the money into the system for X number of years. The money is supposed to come to you. It's not the government's money. Or, for example, if you're a veteran and you're waiting for an operation, and all of a sudden, because they're understaffed, they say, well, we can't do that now for months and months. People are going to die. People are going to suffer. People are going to go hungry. The government is going to be less and less effective. And that, of course, is the objective. The objective is not cost savings. You know why we know it's not cost savings? Because the entire expense of everybody who is employed in the federal government is less than 2% of the total budget of the U.S. federal government, which means if you fired everybody, you'd only be saving 2% from the federal budget. But of course, there are hidden costs in firing all of those people. And if you fire say 10% of them, the effect on the federal budget is, of course, de minimis. So why do it? Why do it if it's got a de minimis effect in terms of savings? Except if your goal is to get rid of federal government, get rid of the agencies, get rid of so-called administrative state. And why would you do that if you cared about people? And the answer is you wouldn't. Okay, this is only, but Elon Musk doesn't care what happens to Social Security, or doesn't care what happens at HHS, doesn't care what happens at the Veterans Administration, because it doesn't matter to him, because he gets all that, he pays for it all himself, and so do rich people. And so you're left with a system where the poorest are hurt. Notice the targeting of Medicaid by the House. They go after the poorest because they feel they have the least political leverage, because in the United States, since Citizens United, political leverage is financial leverage. And they can't do a lot except vote. And we will see whether doing incredibly unpopular things with the people at large ultimately can be translated into votes in 2026 or beyond, or whether Trump and the others are able to, via a variety of means, make it harder and harder for those people to vote and do what they can to put their thumb on the scale of those elections. You have to believe, since they're doing a bunch of things that they know are politically unpopular, that they think they can make elections less reflective of the public will, and they can silence large groups of people. Trump yesterday went off on the idea of voting by mail, lied about that, said it wasn't done anywhere else in the world. It is. Is trying to get things and done in a way that keeps notably poor people and people of color from voting. So that's going to be one of the big stories to watch here, is whether they are able to both punish, inflict damage on the American people, and survive politically, which would require, of course, rewiring the American political system. So we'll keep an eye on those long-term stories as well as what happens each and every day. We look forward to having you join us again. Later today, we'll be doing our regular podcast with Norm Ornstein. He'll be looking at what's going on in the Congress and elsewhere. That's one you don't want to miss. And of course, we have Still Consciousness, and we have our new podcast on energy and climate and AI, which you don't want to miss. And all of this, of course, should be reason for you to want to become a DSR subscriber, where you can listen to these podcasts without advertising messages. You can listen to these podcasts, get bonus content, and so forth. So become a member. Join us here at other podcasts later today, tomorrow, and beyond. And until then, join me in thanking Riley and Minna and Minna's fake car. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.